Hi. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be tuning in from. Welcome to the New Humanitarians online conversation about gang violence in Latin America and the Caribbean. My name is Matt Crook, and I am the New Humanitarians staff editor for live journalism and outreach. For those of you who may be new to TNH, might be the first time you're tuning in, we are an independent nonprofit newsroom that specializes in covering humanitarian crises. We're broadcasting right now on LinkedIn and YouTube and also Twitter. So hello to you wherever you're tuning in. And welcome to a conversation that I'm really looking forward to having with Daniela Mohor, who is the New Humanitarians Latin America editor at large. So welcome, Daniela, and hi, thanks for joining us. Cool. So before we get started, just want to let you know that we welcome your questions and comments, and that I'll be monitoring the chats. So anything you might say on LinkedIn or YouTube, I'll be able to see up here. I've got a little chat stream there. So anything you want to say, any questions for Daniela, any comments, please don't be shy. Please use this opportunity to engage and have a conversation with us. And please also, it'd be great to for you to say hello and for us to to know where you're tuning in from. So we've got about 30 to 45 minutes, to have this conversation. And it's a conversation that I really wanted to have with Daniela because, like many of our readers, I've been really gripped and captivated by the reporting that we've been doing over the past 6 months on gang violence in Latin America and the Caribbean. You may have come across our series, Gangs Out of Control. It's linked in the little description of the event here, and also I'll drop it in the comments in case you don't see it. But it's really worth checking out, and it's an ongoing body of work that examines the spread of gangs throughout the region and takes a closer look at really the failure of the region's governments to control and curb the violence, and also looking at the humanitarian fallout of that, which is something we're going to get into in this conversation. You may also have seen in the news just recently that the UN Security Council recently approved a mission to send a Kenyan-led security force to Haiti in an effort to really quell the gang violence there. And as we've seen in our reporting, while Haiti's situation is particularly critical, it's not just Haitians that are confronted by this problem. There's been surges in gang violence seen in a variety of different settings across the region in recent years. So our task today is, with this online conversation, is really to dive a little bit deeper into some of the reporting that we've been doing, and Daniela is here to help me explore why we're seeing this surge in this kind of violence, and why governments in the region have really failed to prevent this, and also to look at how this trend is disrupting the day-to-day life of people in affected communities. So Daniela, that's more than enough from me. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about Gangs Out of Control, this series that we've had running for more than 6 months now. It'd be great if you could maybe tell us a little bit about where the idea for the series comes from, and why this is a body of reporting that you really wanted to pursue in such depth, and also sort of related to that, what recent developments kind of prompted your thinking on this series. So over to you. Let me just unmute you. Okay.
Thank you. I think that's first. Hello to everyone from wherever you're connecting, and thank you for joining us. So this series started because I live in Santiago in Chile, and the issue of the rise of organized crime in this country that was until recently very peaceful in that sense became the number one concern for Chileans, and this also led me to look at what's happening in other countries, and Chile is not the only one facing this situation. some of you may have seen the headlines on the assassination of a presidential candidate in Ecuador. Ecuador has been facing an explosive rise of gang violence. In Peru, rates have risen as well. So there is a spread of this insecurity related to gang violence. And we often see headlines about, big events such as the assassination of the candidate in Ecuador, or in local news, when maybe in wealthier neighborhoods, people are attacked or robbed or anything. But I felt that the reality of the millions of Latin Americans who face gang violence on a daily basis wasn't it was undercovered. So I really wanted to look at what it means for them, and that's why we decided to do this series, also because it really has a very strong impact, and it's really related to humanitarian issues across the region. So that's how it started.
Cool. Thank you for that. And so maybe sort of expanding on that a little bit, could you maybe tell us about, what have really been the findings that you've seen, from this series? What have been some of your takeaways, some of the things we've learned, anything that was maybe surprising or interesting that you've seen?
Well, this increase, I mean, the issues of gang violence has been going on for decades in Latin America, maybe not as much in South America, but in Central America, it's something pretty much endemic. And we first try to explore why there is this new surge right now. So some of the findings we have are related to the cause of this new surge in gang violence, which is in big part an effect of the COVID-19 pandemic that left many areas unpoliced and gave space for international cartels to move in and to rely on local gangs to do their local operations. The economic hardship also had people, joining gangs more than before. And that these were very big findings in terms of the causes and how this gang have thrived. I don't know. The other thing that we found out is how the Venezuelan exodus has been used by these armed groups, to infiltrate many countries, and also to find new victims, because Venezuelan migrants are very vulnerable, and they are targeted as for human trafficking, sexual exploitation. We have a story on Peru. In Lima, where many Venezuelan sex workers mostly, and Peruvian as well, have been gunned down by gangs, because this big Venezuelan gang called the Tren de Aragua is penetrating these South American countries, and they have been able to forge, a real sex exploitation empire, and they're fighting, local gangs for territory. So these are some of the main findings that we have. We also have seen some shifts in the way this operates in Honduras, for instance, where gang violence has been an issue for a long time. In 2012, I think San Pedro Sula was considered the capital of murders in the world. And then there was a little decrease in homicide rates. But now we're seeing that the most affected areas in terms of gang violence are no longer urban centers necessarily, but rural areas. And that was another surprising finding, I believe. And then I could get into more things that are more related to maybe things we're going to discuss further ahead in the conversation.
Sure. No, that sounds good. Thank you. Maybe we could talk a little bit about Haiti now, because we've been doing a lot of reporting from Haiti, and Haiti's been in the news, just recently, it sounds like there's going to be deployment of this international security force to Haiti, and Haiti is one of the countries most affected by gang violence.
Yes.
So this security force, it's backed by both Haiti's de facto PM and U.S. President Biden, but not everyone is happy with this idea, right? Not everyone thinks this is necessarily the right way to go about it. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about why that is? What are some of the counterpoints to this?
Yes. Well, first, I would like maybe to remind whoever is listening what the situation is in Haiti. Haiti really, in terms of gang violence, stands apart from the rest of the region at this point. I mean, we're seeing a wave of violence that is unprecedented, both in the country and in other countries in the region. I mean, we've seen almost 200 more, I think, than 200,000 displaced people because of gangs. Gangs are controlling most of the capital Port-au-Prince. They're now expanding to other regions of central Haiti, and it's completely disrupting Haitians' life. I mean, women are gang raped, and I invite you to look at the story we wrote about that with 3 testimonies that are really horrific. Children can go to school because they can get shot, or schools closed because of gangs fighting in the areas. There is no medical access. MSF had to close several hospitals, and they had one patient being taken from a surgery during a surgery and then killed outside the hospital. I mean, it's really an unbearable situation. So first of all, I'd like to talk about a lot of Haitians are tired of having foreign interventions and have bad memories of the MINUSTA experience, which is the stabilization mission from the UN that stayed for 13 years between 2004 and 2017, and that led to allegations of sexual abuse, exploitation, violence, and brought an outbreak of cholera that killed 10,000 people in Haiti. So this is still something fresh in Haitians' memory. And also, they, from the people I've talked to, they would like to be part of the solutions for their countries many times, and they feel that the international community, when they intervene, they don't necessarily take into account their culture or their ability to be involved in the solutions. However, the violence and the continuous violence has taken a toll on them, and many people who were against an intervention now see no other option. I mean, I've talked to people who say, what choice do we have now? This is unbearable. People are kidnapped on a daily basis. So even for Asian citizens, even if they were against, many of them are so desperate that they are welcoming any help possible. So this is, I think, it's important to show the nuance there. It's not like all black and white. And then you have some experts who have other concerns. For instance, one of the main concerns is the fact that the mission will be led by Kenyan police. I mean, by Kenya as a country, but 1,000 police officers will be sent to help the Haitian police fight gangs. And there is a record of human rights abuse by Kenyan police. And also, they don't speak any of the Haitians' language. No, they don't speak French. They don't speak Creole. So, and it's been studied that to communicate with gangs, and in this case also maybe they can use interpreter to communicate with the police. But if you need to communicate with gangs or with local population, I mean, it's important to have knowledge of these languages. And then there are other concerns in terms of sending security force without solving other issues such as governance. And also there are allegations of complicity between gangs and the de facto government. So some people, such as Pierre Espérance, who is a human rights advocate, and leads the I don't know the name in English, but it's Human Rights Defense Organization Network. And and he said, there is complicity. This could lead to more violence if the people the security forces talk to are people representative from the government and who are conniving with gangs. So there is that concern as well for some of the people, and they call for political negotiations before sending the force, and having a government that is considered more legitimate, or where people have been vetted. And the last concern, I think, would be for some humanitarian organizations who don't really know how this is going to unfold, and whether it's going to, really help humanitarian access to people in need, or hinder it even more than it's happening now.
Fascinating, thank you. You mentioned nuances just then, and so obviously the situation is particularly critical and deep rooted in Haiti, but this is sometimes framed, sometimes written about, sometimes framed as a regional issue. So could you maybe talk a bit more about some of the nuances that really differentiate, the situations from one country to another? Like, should we be thinking of this as a regional issue, or kind of like a collection of sort of individual issues? So what are the sort of the nuances and some of the similarities and differences?
I think there are things in common because gangs operate in similar ways everywhere, but it for sure there are differences between sub-regions. I mean, in Central America, you have an endemic violence. It's been there for a long time, inherited from sometimes civil war, dictatorship, or whatever the history is. And that has led to a normalization of violence that leads to other humanitarian issues, such as gender-based violence, or the fact that the youth maybe don't see any or doesn't think about any other opportunities than joining gangs to make a living. And then you have other countries such as Colombia, where it's some political developments that have led to surges in violence. For instance, the dismantling of the FARC has led to the appearance of new groups, and they're now fighting for territorial control. And that has also meant, worsening in a lot of people's lives. And then you have the South American countries, as I mentioned at the beginning, such as, Chile, but mostly Ecuador, where really the homicide rates have increased dramatically from, in 2018, it was about 6 homicides per 100,000 people, and that raised to nearly 26 in 2022 or this year. I don't remember if it's early this year or late 2022, but then it's expected to reach as much as 40 people by the end of the year. So, and these are countries that didn't have any experience with such level of violence, and they're faced to something new that they don't necessarily know how to address.
So
And it has, I'm sorry, it has a strong impact also on politics, because when you have candidates, regular politicians killed by gangs, I mean, there are issues of corruption, or it influences the electoral choices people are going to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So you've touched there on a little bit about the impact on people, on communities, and how this is affecting people. But I was wondering if you could maybe expand on that a little bit more, to to talk about maybe from your own experiences, from what you've seen in your coverage, in our reporting of what life is like under these gangs. What's the impact of gang violence on people's daily lives, and so a bit more, maybe a bit about what the humanitarian fallout of living in this kind of environment is on people.
Sure. Well, it's affecting mostly poor communities that have less resources, where state presence is lacking, and gangs can operate more freely, or even taking the state's space and providing maybe some services that the governments don't provide in some areas. But mostly what we see is rampant extortion. People are extorted for whatever they do. They're asked to pay a fee to have a business. They are charged an additional fee when they take the bus to go somewhere. And if they don't pay, they can be killed. So we've seen it. We did a story recently on gang violence in a neighborhood of Guayaquil, which is now one of the main ports to export cocaine to the US and Europe. And it's been really, really stricken by violence. And this community, just in the span of a few weeks, has stopped. Many people stopped going to work because they were afraid of going in the street after one person was killed for not being able to pay an extortion. It's not even that they don't want to pay. Sometimes they don't have the money to pay, and they don't send their kids to school. They can go out to work. Sometimes they're threatened, so they leave. They're internally displaced, or they try to migrate. In some countries, as Honduras, they can be, followed by gangs. They move to another town, and then they're found there. So it multiple displacements, and that leads to people who are poor are falling into extreme poverty. This also leads to a series of mental health, lack of access to education, lack of access to to basic services, as we're seeing in Haiti, for instance, but it happens in other neighborhoods as well.
Thank you.
So in some places also people live in confinement. I mean, there are areas in Colombia where gangs impose confinement from certain hours during the day.
Cool. Thank you for that. So this is having a huge impact on people in their daily lives, and it's happening in multiple countries. But why is this such a neglected issue? And why is it persisted for this long? For all these years.
Well, I think that in many places it's a structural issue. So it's much more difficult to address when it's structural, and often the decisions that are made are more immediate. There are a lot of hardline policies, security policies in many countries. El Salvador is the best example, and it can address the issue for some time, but then it's not going to eradicate it if you don't look at the causes. Government's presence in many places is not sufficient, and the pandemic, as I mentioned, hasn't helped. It also, it hasn't helped because there is more economic hardship. Maybe resources are distributed to other emergencies, like the health emergency. And there were programs that were shut down, for instance, in some neighborhoods during the pandemic, and afterwards they weren't reopened. So, that's to show that it's a persistent issue. Why has it been neglected? I think that one of the issues that Latin America faces, generally speaking, is that it's a continent, it's a middle income continent. So it's not considered as a priority in many sense for humanitarian assistance. But at the same time, it's one of the most unequal regions in the world. So you have places where the reality is really, really bad. People face a lot of needs, basic needs, and it's not well known because other areas don't have those needs. And that's been I know that humanitarian workers in Latin America wish there was more interest in the continent and in their needs. And even for gang violence, if you see what happens in some places, it's pretty similar to what other people face in wars. I mean, there is not that much difference. That's what humanitarians have told me, at least, and I think that that's one of the main reasons why it's been neglected.
So you've talked about humanitarian workers, wishing there was more attention on this issue, and how it's a middle income region, so maybe this isn't a priority for donors, for others, but so this is not traditionally or always thought of as a humanitarian issue, but why should it be, or why would it be? Would you say?
Well, I think I've talked about the effects already on people's life, and if you look at that, internal displacement, lack of access to basic services, lack of education, losing your sources of livelihood, gender-based violence, hunger. I haven't mentioned hunger, but in many of these communities, well, because of poverty, they have to skip meals. They're falling into hunger. The example of Haiti is enlightening. You have half the population losing, in hunger, in severe hunger. So these are all humanitarian issues. I mean, everything I've mentioned is considered in other situations humanitarian issues. And also, you have this continent, this region that is vulnerable to natural disasters. There is a rise in migration. So anything that adds to those emergencies will make things worse. And that's why I think that it's time to pay more attention to this, because and the funding is lacking today globally because of the Ukraine war. It's likely to get worse now with new conflicts appearing, and there is already a lack of funding. I mean, I know that only 25 by mid 2023, only 25% of the humanitarian plans response plans in the regions were funded. So there is a lot of space to fill.
Thank you. So that right. So there are humanitarians there in the region working on this issue, but there's obviously a lack of funding. So at this point, what's the role of the aid sector? What are they doing? What can or can't they do here?
Well, sometimes they just go to places to provide some basic services like healthcare or education programs, or education on gender-based violence, or they provide food. I mean, that's a role they can play. It's very. I mean, they're addressing emergencies, but this is a chronic situation. And in fact, one other issue is that some organizations have shut down programs because it's considered a chronic situation, and they only work in emergency response. And the other issue that there is that makes humanitarian work difficult is that these are compounding issues. That some call them complex issues. It's not that violence happens alone. Sometimes it happens in context of displacement because of other humanitarian problems, such as natural disaster or a lack of work. And so it's very difficult to identify where the problem is, only related to violence, or what the source of the humanitarian situation is. And in some areas, it's not been identified at all. I mean, there are remote areas in Brazil where it's not been identified, for instance, and so there is no response there. But definitely, there is work being done, and there is work being done, and some organizations are trying to do more capacity building to make changes more sustainable for local communities. And And I think that more globally, what needs to be done is to, not focus only on the emergency, but work more on the structural issues. That's what experts are telling us, at least in our reporting.
Thank you. So yeah, a lot of work being done, but obviously, very, very challenging to do that work. I just want to remind everyone that we are live, on LinkedIn and YouTube and also Twitter. And if you have a question for Daniela, please don't be shy. Please, just drop us a comment. And we'll be able to see it. So any questions, comments, anything you want to say, please do, and we'll see those. But so kind of moving this conversation on a little bit. We've talked about sort of what aid workers are doing and the challenges they face. But are there any agreements or understandings in place between aid workers and gangs? Are the two able to kind of coexist? Do they communicate? And what are some of the kind of risks faced by by aid workers working on these issues in the region?
Well, there are many risks. Again, Haiti is an example of that. But everywhere, there has been more attacks on ambulances or maybe health centers in Central America as well, and in Colombia. Two things get more difficult when there are changes of leadership in gangs, and when there is more infighting between gangs for territorial control, it gets even more difficult to get access. So the only organization I understand that is authorized to engage directly with gangs is the ICRC. But so usually organizations rely on local communities or local authorities to as intermediaries to be in contact with gangs or to warn them, please, we're going to come for an intervention, tomorrow or next week or something, and then they can go safely. Many times it's under hostile observation. You have, the gangs don't intervene, but they watch them from afar or something like that. And also, what has happened in some places that gang members use, vests or logos from humanitarian organizations, to enter other territories and start a fight out of surprise. So, I mean, the risks are huge. I think it's difficult for many humanitarian workers to reach those in need and have access. It's been difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds incredibly challenging. So what does our reporting, the reporting that you've been doing, through this series, what does it maybe suggest about next steps in terms of what happens next and sort of how this situation moves forward from here?
Well, what people have told us is that they consider that gang violence should be sometimes treated as something as bad as a war, in terms of its effect on some communities, and then maybe there should be more more focus on longer term programs. I know that capacity building or preparing communities to know how to deal with violence related situations. For example, if they know how to react to a shooting, maybe they wouldn't have to close schools or health centers, but they would know what safety measure to take. Some communities take their own measures, but it shouldn't be their responsibility solely to be able to live safely. I believe that what other people have told us is that they feel there should be more support to humanitarian workers as well, because it's difficult to do this work, not being able. I mean, the relationship with gangs is always difficult. One of the things that we have told could works pretty well is that gang members, I'm sorry, belong to communities, and they often want better chances for their kids. So investing in programs that give young people the opportunity not to have to join gangs, more education, job opportunities, or training capacity, skill training. All this is something that could contribute to make some changes.
Thank you for that. That kind of brings an end to the main questions that I had. We have had a couple of questions from some of you who are viewing this on YouTube and LinkedIn. So I can turn to those now. We have a question here from Caris Nietzsche. I'm terribly sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but the question is: are there humanitarian consequences? Are the humanitarian consequences different between violence exerted by gangs or cartels and recognized war?
That's a difficult one to answer. I imagine it's different according to every place. I mean, if we look at Haiti, I don't think there is much difference between the situation there and other places in war. In other areas, it's not as acute as in a war, and you still have some access to basic services. I really think it depends on where we're looking at. But there are places in Latin America, and that's something that the experts we have talked to, or the humanitarian workers organizations we have talked to, are really like a war zone.
Thank you. And then one other question: how can we make the humanitarian consequences of violence in Latin America more visible? So I guess how can these issues get greater visibility among kind of global audiences?
Well, I think that's the objective of our series is precisely to give these issues more visibility. I think the best way is to talk about and to report on what the population and local residents really face, and show what it means. Because I feel that right now what we see in the news is not really highlighting enough what the deep impacts and the different layers of the impacts of gang violence are. Sometimes it falls into sensationalism, and there is no analysis of what's going on, or any interest in asking those affected exactly what it means for them, and not coming, parachuting there and saying, and portray them only purely as victims. All of that contributes to give a bit better idea of the needs of millions of Latin Americans.
Thank you. And so there you've touched on really the purpose of the series and why we're doing this. I was wondering, maybe to kind of wrap this up. I think we've reached the end of this conversation. But as one final question from me, I'd be interested to hear what you'll be reporting on next. Where you'd like to take this series now. What are the stories you're going to be covering, what you have planned and ideas on that front.
We're going to look into the issue of engagement with gangs. That's one of the pieces that we've been working on. I mean, it's going to be an opinion piece, and another countries we would like to look into is El Salvador, because it's been a symbol of the tough crime response to gang violence. I mean, we've seen how the government of Nayib Bukele has sent to prison more than 70,000 people, allegedly gang members. But I mean, there are reports of massive human rights violations, and of people who are not gang members being arrested arbitrarily. And we are going to look into what it means in terms of humanitarian effects. I mean, I know, for instance, that many children are left without parents, or women are left without source of income, because in many cases the men were those bringing income to the household, and they have to handle this new situation, and there are other issues appearing. We're trying to look into if these investment in security policies have meant less resources to address other issues such as schooling or access to medical care and other services that are important in maybe in more rural areas.
That's great. Awesome. Cool. Thank you. So we've got a body of work there that's 6 months in and heaps of reporting already, but like a lot more to come. So please do check out the series Gangs Out of Control. It's linked in the description here, and I'll put it again in the comments once we're done here. But just would like to say thank you Daniela for this conversation. It's been really interesting, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Please, wherever you are, if you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, please be sure to subscribe or like our page if you're just coming to us today and you're new. And please also follow us on Twitter @NewHumanitarian. You can also follow Daniela. That's her Twitter handle up there. But we'll bring this to a close now. And thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Daniela.
Thank you all.